You are now listening to Creator Corner. Welcome to Creator Corner. We're the hosts. I'm Mary.
I'm Dalia.
And today we're very excited to talk to Stephanie Franco. She is a self-taught creative writer, audio storyteller, and sound and designer engineer based in Oakland, California. She's very passionate about highlighting the work of Black, Indigenous, and people of color narratives in her work. Welcome to the pod, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you so much both for having me. I'm really excited to be here on the podcast.
Yes, we're super excited to have you, Stephanie. You know, as Mary said, you are wearing so many different hats as a creative. So in this space today, we just want to hear a little bit more about, how you are navigating being a host, a producer, a writer in all the spaces that you're collaborating in with other folks. But before we jump into that conversation, we like to do a quick rapid fire just to get us warmed up and prepared to dive a little deeper. So first question, Stephanie. If you could be any other type of creator outside like a writer, a producer, like what other creative would you be?
Oh, wow. I think I would definitely be maybe like a culinary chef. Growing up, I really like to bake and make pastries at home. So it's definitely a creative outlet that I've not tapped into in a long time. So I think that's definitely a different form of creativity that I would love to do.
Yeah, I think I saw that you were really into like vegan recipes. Is that right?
Yeah. I do like to cook once in a while, but it does take a lot of patience for me to kind of create some recipes and all of that.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I know I know when my mom's like cooking, she'll just like be in her zone and like dropping all the stuff on there. Yeah. So I definitely is like a very like creative space to be able to make these tastes merge together and be delicious.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole experience.
Awesome. Well, the other question we have for you is, so we know you're really focused, which is incredible, on really highlighting like Black, Indigenous, people of color narratives. But if you could be a writer about anything else, is there another topic that you'd be interested in writing about?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes up to me is self-love. And that's always been a journey that, I'm on. And whenever I find myself journaling or just writing for fun, it always comes back to writing love letters for myself and just, making myself feel really good or really beautiful through my own words. So I would definitely write about self-love, and I consistently do that, but not enough.
Wow, I love that, Stephanie. I think I love how you said like this self-love is a constant journey, because I can definitely relate in that. I think we're evolving a lot. Well, I am evolving a lot in like self-love and that means. So I can imagine the power of you writing to yourself and just flourishing yourself with flowers and abundance of that. So I love that.
Yeah. It's interesting to look back on things that I write for myself, or little love letters or little love poems, because it just reminds me of the season that I was in and what I was going through and what I needed to hear.
Yeah, no, definitely love that, Stephanie. Thanks for sharing. As we learned, Stephanie, I don't know how you do it, but you wear so many different hats as a creative, ranging from writer to producing to editing and audio, like, again, digital storytelling. But I think we want to dive in a little bit, like let's backtrack a little bit, and can you tell us like how you started really expressing your creativity as younger Stephanie, as a child?
Yeah. I remember being in 3rd grade and going to Sanrio and buying like little notebooks. They were very cute. They had different like Hello Kitty prints.
Love Hello Kitty.
I would fill up each page with what I did during the day in the summertime. And that became an outlet for me to just kind of like put my feelings onto the page and just reflect and have like a safe space for myself to process those emotions or anything that I would kind of like feel going on in my family. I would take it down in my little notebook. So I definitely started writing at a very young age, and it wasn't until I think maybe I got to maybe college or once I graduated from college where I started to think about how I could use, you know, writing as a form of creative storytelling. And so it led me into various different paths like producing, script writing, poetry, everything. I think writing has definitely always been like the main focus that has opened up a lot of creative opportunities for me.
That, and you know what's so interesting about that is, like, to your point, it was like the doorway to explore storytelling in different forms. In terms of, you know, personally for me, sometimes I have trouble like writing and expressing it on paper and then going back and like reading that back to myself. And I'm just curious personally, how did you give yourself the space to, I guess, feel safe in exploring those different outlets and evolving into, you know, trying what fit or what may not fit? And as you took that jump from growing your creative writing.
Yeah, I always tell myself to not be afraid to fail. And so I'm also a very passionate person about so many things, and I feel like capitalism and society like really forces us into a box of like choosing one thing, like one career. And I always find myself just battling with that and being like, well, I have so many different passions. Like, what if one day I just want to wake up and do something different? And so I've definitely given myself that like risk to jump in and learn something new, whether it's audio editing or, you know, whether it's like learning how to start a podcast or learning how to produce and film. And I've just kind of kept going and following that and seeing what lights up my heart and sets my soul on fire, because I think that's like the ultimate thing that just really brings me joy.
Yeah, no, I love that, Stephanie, because I think you're right in terms of we were told this narrative of you go to college, you find a career that fits you, and you follow your passion, quote unquote, and it only has to be one passion. But I agree that it doesn't necessarily always have to be that one passion. Someone could be like yourself, multiple, just talented in different ways, and it's okay to also switch up. So I do agree with the capitalistic world of, and just the so normalized world of you choose one career and that's it. But I love that.
Yeah, and it's helpful to see other creatives too that I admire, like Issa Rae, and reading her bio and seeing how she's a writer, a producer, an author, like a director. So I'm like, if she could do it, we can all do it, you know, like it's possible. Yeah,
definitely. And I think with that, I think you shared that, I mean, we know that you're also from the Bay Area and you have history working at nonprofits, specifically in health equity. Can you dive a little bit deeper on how your environment, whether it's the Bay Area or you working in a space where you talked a lot about health equity, has really impacted your creative journey?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say when I was working with youth, I loved working with youth. Like, they have always just lit me up. I'm smiling as I'm just talking about my journey with youth. But I feel like having the time to be a youth organizer with them and also work in community advocacy work and mental health just really gave me a bigger lens of how to kind of include those stories in whatever I write and whatever I produce. And it just added to my politicization of the world and what I want to contribute, like what stories haven't been told about the Bay, what do I want to highlight, what do I want to leave, you know, people to think about in terms of my own legacy here or anything of that line. So I'd say those experiences definitely added to just how I tap into the different stories I want to share with the world, because they're just very unique experiences. And I'd say growing up in the Bay, you know, you see like the impact of gentrification and all of that. And so I definitely would go back into films or podcasts and just kind of take note of like who's not talking about that yet, and how can I add my own twist or perspective to it. And you know, even being like a young professional and navigating the world and understanding that I had to choose one specific route, but I didn't want to. I was like, well, I don't see anyone talking about that. Let me take that risk and like share the story, or like help people maybe relate to whatever I'm feeling.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, appreciate just what you've shared there in terms of how your environment has really impacted your creativity, and just the involvement of evolving your creativity into something that resonates with you on a like mission level. If you saw a lack there and you're intentionally moving to bridge those spaces and, you know, add your own personal take that comes from being from the Bay Area, being involved in advocacy work and in these like institutional healthcare organizations that are perhaps not actually supporting the communities that they're in. But to that, you know, what we found really interesting as we were, you know, looking at your trajectory in podcasting was the importance of, you know, diverse in digital storytelling. And so we would love to hear, Stephanie, in your own words, like, how do you define digital storytelling?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, how do I define digital storytelling? I think we're in a day and age, right, where social media is the norm. At least for me, I'm always on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and that's become a huge avenue for artists to just have a medium, whether that's in poetry or sharing their YouTube channels. And so I feel like the way that I define digital storytelling is just having like a platform for you to like share your story or share like your creativity and what you envision in the world and how you feel. And I think moving a little bit past kind of the different avenues that we used to have, right? Like newspapers were a big form of storytelling. Like the radio used to be a big form of storytelling, and now we're in podcasting. So I think digital storytelling is like the new wave of how to just kind of like convey all the experiences that someone may have.
No, I like that how you're saying there's just new forms and new avenues to convey maybe not similar stories, but the way we used to tell stories through newspapers and radios and whatnot is just transforming now more digitally, and it's quicker to even have those kind of outlets to access. So I think that's a great way to say just like how creatives or even just people in general tell their stories through these digital mediums.
Yeah, and I think it's also given creatives more access to share their stories. Yeah. Like, I always find it really amazing when people start to use Medium or Substack to kind of have a digital newsletter, right? And I think it's given people more like flexibility on how they want to convey that story. And whether same thing with podcasting, right? Like there's so many podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and it's cool to just be able to tap into your interests in a new way digitally.
Yeah, no, for sure. And speaking of that,
go ahead, Talia. Add one thing. I think that's been the most like fascinating thing about starting this journey, Stephanie, that all these different tools are already available. They're just typically not aware to like a larger audience. If we're talking about like specifically, like, let's say like the Latina community. There's like so many incredible stories to be told there. They're like the number one consumers of like content, entertainment, and like the access is there, but the tools are still not fully available to folks that, you know, want to start their own podcast or want to get their own story out there. There's still like so much learning to do there. So yeah, it is very interesting how there's like more access, yet it's still very like not fully, like, I guess, like expanded across communities. But yeah, so I think it's like super interesting just to hear about you specifically in the spaces that you're creating, and you're intentionally like bridging. It's to highlight and uphold like these like specific Black, Indigenous, people of color in these spaces. But yeah, it's really awesome.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to say too that I remember facilitating a workshop with Locatora Radio on youth storytelling and how to build your own podcast at home. And at the time, everybody was buying mics. Everybody was like, we have to be in the studio. We have to have like really good headphones. And I remember showing up to the workshop and being like, you could just use voice memo on your phone. And that's literally how I started the podcast with my co-host, Work Wifeys, where we would just go into her car and
so dope.
record on voice memo. And people were like, hey, what mic do you use? You sound really good. And I think sharing that like allowed people to be like, oh wow, like it is a little bit more simpler than people make it seem, you know. And it's like we have to use the tools that are already available for us, but sometimes we just like overthink it or feel like we have to be in these fancy like networks and studios. But nah, voice memo is sometimes the way to go.
Guys, love the simplicity.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely relate. We started with, I mean, we dabbled with just regular, just like Apple regular freaking headphones, and then we're like, oh, let's try voice memos. And then I think over time it evolves too. Once you dabbled a little bit, then maybe in, you know, your first year, or once you've tried it, then maybe it's time to invest in something if that's worthwhile, or if that really aligns with the creatives. But to your point, I think we just have to use the resources we have at the beginning and not overthink it as much.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think with that, Steph, I think when you talk about storytelling, is there a specific kind of creative process you use as a producer and also as a podcast host? And if so, can you dive a little bit about like what your creative process look like?
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a creative process really. And it's something I'm still figuring out what my particular flow is. Sometimes it might be me going outside and just writing and being in nature. But I will be honest, I think I have hit a little bit of a creative halt where I'm realizing like what do I want to produce? You know, like being in different projects and producing for other people is always really amazing, but I think I haven't had a chance, or maybe I'm just a little afraid to produce my own stuff and, you know, take that creative risk on my own stories and sharing. And so I'm still figuring out what my creative process is, but I can share a little bit about being a co-host on Work Wifeys and what that flow looked like. And me and my co-host Itzel, we would go to a coffee shop before COVID, you know, was happening. Like we would go to Tierra Mia and we would just kind of like have brainstorm sessions and have some cafecito, talk, laugh, go grab some Thai food and then brainstorm a little bit more. So it was always structured around, you know, something fun like a coffee shop, and then fueling our bodies with some food or boba or a little treat, you know. And we would set a time for weekly meetings. So I think every Saturday or Sunday at noon, like that was like our time. And it became a little tradition. So that's a little bit about the flow that you know, would happen when I was in that element of like creating and flowing with what are we going to talk next. Sometimes I think when we've been stuck on not knowing what to talk about, we'll be like, well, what's coming up for us spiritually in life? Like, what's the new moon in?
Yeah.
Like, what's it calling? Like, we would get all like astrological. Sometimes we would pull out a tarot card, and you know, the stars and the moon never lie, and they would just kind of be like, oh, this is happening. And then we would start picking apart, like, yeah, I think that's also going on in my life. Okay, today we're gonna talk about this. So that's a bit about the flow.
Yeah, that is so awesome. I love hearing that, Stephanie, because like in a way, you know, Mary and I were very close friends. We met in college.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful seeing like the alignment in terms of like your process. Like Mary and I are like completely different states. So obviously we don't have like the cafecito moment here. But there is like these conversations around like spirituality and like energy work and what's the vibe at this moment that do resonate as you're walking through that. And even as you're walking through this, like I can visualize like the space that you've created with your friend, and like how like, you know, joyful and funny, and I'm sure y'all were like cracking up as you're like brainstorming together.
I know. Yeah, it's the best times, like really to have those conversations and just like have fun and, you know, create. Like we would always be like, create to liberate, and share your stories, because at the end of the day, like there's somebody else who could tell them for you, you know, like a white person can be out there selling a cookbook or telling your story, but it's like, no, you have, you know, the right to share like your experiences. But
it's like, you're right, anyone can like take on that story and like write it on their own. Saw like this guy that said that he invented horchata the other day. It was like a white guy. What? I'm like, what?
The audacity! What?
Me. Like what? And
that's wild.
Oh Lord.
But just like the joy and the fun that the space that you created with your friend for creativity, it's like a safe space where it's like all play and fun while still like, you know, retaining that aspect of like creating and, you know, going deep into like your point, like topics around like what's going on with your life and spirituality. Keeping that balance there while keeping it light, I think is so incredible. You mentioned something earlier, Stephanie, when you said that at this moment, I guess in the present, you're a bit in like a little creative block. Can you tell us like a little bit about that? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when I say a creative block, I really mean I haven't been writing as much as I should be always, or, you know, tapping into my own creative projects. And I think that really stems from not having the energy sometimes, and just not really having like the capacity. I feel like creating, you have to be balanced, you know, you got to be nourished, you got to have your sleep, your stress has got to be low so that you could be like at a high vibration to create what you want to share. And I think my creativity has just been on a little pause for a bit, in terms of how much I used to just kind of like write or post my poetry. So yeah, definitely on a journey of exploring like, okay, how do I get back into it, and what do I want to share with the world? One day I hope to write a book on healing and what that looks like for me and what my mental health journey has been. But I think fear stops me from like sharing my story, and it's always like something I'm still working through, and hoping that, you know, I can allow myself to just like create from that lens and share share the talent that writing is for me to the world.
Yeah, Stephanie, I think I mean, well, I'll be here. We'll wait patiently when
Thank
that
you,
creative
Mary.
burst comes through you. I
Appreciate
think it will
y'all.
be very present and apparent. And I think, to your point, I think as a creative, there's so much like energy put into it, and I think it's okay to, as like, for me at least as a newer creative, like it's okay to not have that capacity at time. It's okay to
Yeah.
postpone it at times. I think going back to just, I'll find my groove again, or I'll find that outlet. It'll come when I'm ready, when I'm
Yes.
nourished and balanced. And
Yes.
again, we'll be on the lookout for that, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate y'all.
And I think what resonated, Steph, is just like in this blockage. And I don't know, I think for me there has been also a lot of different blockages, and some ways that I've tried to unblock those is through mindfulness. But as a creative, are there ways that you want to try, or you would recommend trying, to really re-energize this inner creativity in you?
Yeah, I would say talking to other people who are doing similar work, just talking to y'all is like filling up my cup already. But also going to a lot of community events. Like yesterday at the Oakland Museum, Ryan Coogler was there, and he talked about his journey as a filmmaker and as a creative. And I find it really inspiring to attend events like that with people that I look up to and whose work I admire and whose stories just like resonate on some capacity, you know, at least being from the Bay. And I would definitely recommend for people to, you know, have some type of community creative group, you know, that either write or do podcasting or produce, because we speak the same language and we get what we're feeling. And then look for events with people that you want to learn from, or with people that really inspire you, because whenever I leave those events, I feel myself ready to like create something.
Yeah, you know, when I'm hearing you talk and, you know, speak about your journey with creativity, there's so much alignment there that I hear in your voice, just around like the like spiritual aspect of creativity. You know, you talked a little bit about like how your channel has to be something that you are, you know, working on consistently as a creative, you know, making sure that you're taken care of as well. And so, you know, in your history as, you know, producer, and behind the scenes, you know, some of the topics that you're exploring can be a little bit like heavy in terms of like mental health, or like diving into different aspects of healing. In those type of situations, like how do you take care of yourself or stay grounded? And I know we're talking a little bit about being a bit in a moment of like gathering back all our energy, but I'm just curious how, and behind the scenes, you're also taking care of yourself, whether you might not be in the forefront of the conversation that's happening.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when having those conversations, it's really important for me to just recharge in silence. I could be like a solo person sometimes, and just do a lot of things on my own. And I think it's really helpful for me to have like those moments of silence with myself, or just moments of spontaneity where I can kind of do something that is just for me. Like I take myself out on a date, you know, and just go get some oysters, go to take the ferry to the ferry building in San Francisco, grab some tacos. And those moments really allow me to just reflect and gather myself and figure out like, okay, this happened, like that was a really great conversation. Okay, like how is my body feeling? How is my mind? How's my soul? And those moments allow me to kind of like come back.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's like a big indicator, not just like as a creator, but as an individual. Like if you're comfortable with your own company, I think it's definitely it's a lot. It says a lot about not only your character, but how mindful you are with just being in tune with your body. And I think as a creative, that is like so important, to be so in tune with like your mind, body, and soul, to go back to do the work that you do. But I think you hit on the point there in terms of the importance of being so comfortable with and joyful with your own company.
Yeah, and I know other people too, like, my mom, for example, she gets a lot of energy from being around other people. Like that's her self-care, like being in an event or at like a family gathering. And for me, I think recharging is more like just being on my own, having a little silent time, and just decompressing.
Definitely.
I definitely feel you, as in like introvert myself. It's probably a lot of that Aries energy, because I think I saw you were in Aries.
Yes. Wait, are you an Aries too?
I'm an Aries moon. So there's some alignment there around what I'm hearing. You're like, I like to do things on my own. I can sometimes like be in meditation for like literally like an hour and a half, and I'm like, oh, that was like a nice meditation.
I need to learn from you, because I can only do like 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, it definitely took a while. I had to like adjust and basically find what worked for me, but I go through like a whole visual like practice, and then when I open my eyes, it's like, damn, it's been an hour and I've been like visualizing.
Wow. See, I need to get on that level.
Yeah, I'm barely on
we'll
like.
do a practice.
We should do one,
okay,
but
yes.
Because I'm on that 15-minute mark. I'm trying to like, all right, can I go 20?
Right, like what else can I do?
Right, I'll say, okay, I'm at 15 now. No, I love that.
I love it.
Yeah, but I appreciate you just walking us through like this, journey of taking care of yourself, even as you're working with, collaborating with a lot of different folks, in very intentional spaces that you've, entered. Because when I went into your portfolio, and the first thing I saw was like your little like mission statement about what you're passionate about. And
oh, thank you for going on my website.
Yes, of course.
It means a lot.
And so, I get a clear understanding of like a little bit about what's your why in terms of the spaces that you're in. But I would love to hear from your perspective, as you've navigated different podcasts and different groups that you collab with, why has it been so important to you to make sure that, Black, Indigenous, people of color narratives are at the forefront of these platforms?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, I grew up in the Bay, so the Bay is hella diverse. I went to high school with so many different people from various cultures. Like we had Filipino, we had Samoan, Polynesian, like everything. And so I think that really influenced me and like my understanding of people's experiences and just like how they navigate life, and having like friends from different cultural backgrounds too, growing up in Hayward. And so I've really carried that in my work. And as I've grown up, seeing like the impact of the Black Panthers in Oakland, like seeing all the different like movements that have happened in the Bay, that has always been like a source of inspiration for me. And I always tell myself, like, when I'm in these spaces, I always want to bring forward the voices of Black, Indigenous people of color, because their stories are essential. Like, it's going to elevate the story even more. And so I always carry that with me in the work that I do, in the collaborations that I have with people, and just like making sure that their stories are always being shared, and that the right person is in the room. And sometimes I feel like even in podcasting spaces, people might be sharing stories for others, and it's like not being afraid to call that out and say like, hey, I think we need to have somebody else share that story, and being very unapologetic about it and be like, that's not your story to share. And I really carry that with me through the work, and I've been able to collaborate with various people on amazing projects that just like speak to my passions and a lot of social justice issues, racial justice issues that, you know, I've seen growing up in the Bay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with that, it brings up like a question in terms of why is it really important for you to intentionally join specific organizations like Locatora Productions, and even intentionally collaborating with specific artists? What does that mean to you in terms of the importance of being intentional with, one, organizations you join and put your product out, and two, is there specific criteria per se, like for artists that you choose to collaborate with intentionally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say when it comes to collaborating, I also look at like their mission and their why and how that kind of aligns with me and the work that I do and people who I've worked with in the past, and even working with Locatora now, like obviously like I can relate to the stories they're sharing and their experiences, and it's funny and they have like humor, and so that's like work that I can connect to. But then there's other people where it's like, for me, the collaboration has been important because it's also an opportunity for me to like learn and like listen, like really listen to their experiences, and not just like assume or have any biases, right? Like I'm always on a journey of learning, and I'm a student of life, and so when it comes to storytelling, like that's also something I take into consideration, like really listening and collaborating, and having the opportunity to build those relationships, because people can come to you and want to collaborate, but if it doesn't resonate or if it doesn't align, like for me, I've learned like it's okay to say no. Like just don't say yes to everything, you know, just because an opportunity came up. Like make sure you're really passionate, make sure it aligns with your values, make sure that like you stand with them and you stand for them. And so that's just like what I've learned in my freelance journey, and just, you know, in being in podcasting and producing.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you being on our platform today. And, you know, it sounds like, just based on that answer, that, you know, there's some alignment there in this platform here with, you know, some of your values and your mission and the work that you're doing. It's like, as I said, when we were doing research and we were preparing for this conversation with you, Stephanie, it was just so wonderful to see the different spaces that you've been a part of. And it's going to be so exciting as you shift from being a bit of, I guess, you've been a host before, but also being more intentional about working on your own creative projects and being on the forefront of those. So I'm really excited to see how you take all the learnings from like being the producer, being the audio editor, and to bring that forward. And I think the world is so ready for you to share that. So I'm so like, yeah, and just the knowledge that you have around navigating these spaces it's really wonderful to just hear how that's been. But in terms of that, I know I want to hear, because you mentioned, you know, freelancing and taking on different projects. In the last year, you know, what are some of the biggest risks that you've taken in your creative journey?
Yeah. First, I also want to say that, you know, also congratulations to y'all in your endeavors in starting your podcast. And I like that inspires me so much. And with my own risks, I feel, the biggest risk I took a year ago was just quitting my job at a nonprofit and becoming a full-time freelancer. It was scary, and I feel like it's just scary to lose a job, you know? Like that's yeah. The other day, one of my friends asked me, she was like, oh, aren't you afraid of the layoffs? And I was like, no, because it's already been taken away from me. Like, I've been in experiences where I was unemployed like 3 different times last year, where projects didn't work out and I had to figure it out again and go back to the drawing board. And so taking that leap to just fully edit, be a producer, and like really believe that I have the capacity and the knowledge and the skills and the passion to like do this, like that's always scary for me still up to this day. But yeah, I remember when I first quit my job, I was freaking out, and I think the universe definitely pushed me to do it faster because that job was already very toxic to my health, to my mental health. And so it ended up being, you know, a way for me to just like fully leave and be on this journey that I am on now, where it's been it's been very hard, but it's also been the most fulfilling.
Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation with Mary, before you hop on, Stephanie, that I love having conversations with creators because there's always alignment in what's going on with our life, or that little like golden nugget that we're looking for. And when I hear you talk about leaving this job and just the uncertainty of that, I'm in a similar place at the moment. I literally quit my job last week.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
I think it's my turn, y'all. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, it is, Mary.
But yeah, I'm hearing you talk about this risk that you took, and it's definitely like resonating. Like the feelings, of course, of uncertainty, of like taking this big leap of faith. But to your point, just hearing that, of course, the journey won't be easy. It's, you know, it has ups and downs, but it's like a little affirmation about just like the moment that I'm currently in. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you.
Props to you, Dalia, because like it does take a lot to do that. And so I feel like right when I left my job, there was a whole like portal of opportunities that opened up for me. And literally a week or a couple weeks before, that's the first gig I got at Warner Brothers. And I was like,
that shit wild.
Is this real?
Hell yeah, it was real, Stephanie.
Like, I was like, wait a minute. Why does this feel so like easy, you know? Like it just came into my life and it happened so quick. And it's like, yeah, when you're ready to receive it, it's going to come into your life. And I think that was a good reminder for me that I made a good decision, you know, to take the leap. So I'm excited for you and what comes into your life in this season.
Thank you. I really, really, really appreciate that. And yeah, it sounds like the universe is fully in support of your decision as well, and was ready to like validate you with all these opportunities that are going to continue to come your way. So yeah, thank you for like just being a little vulnerable there, because it's like I said, it's so important, and it's like a little validation of something that I'm so glad I get to be like present and here in this moment.
Yeah, yes. And I definitely don't hear, you know, a lot of people talk about going through that. You know, you log on Instagram and LinkedIn, everybody's posting their wins. It's like, okay, let's talk about the failures.
Right.
I could talk for days about how many no's I've gotten as a producer till this day, where I'm like, what the heck, you know? But you just have to keep going and really believe in yourself.
Yeah, no, definitely. And with that, I think leads us to like our third portion of the conversation in terms of just looking ahead. And I think this is just a great segue because one, like, I think we're always meant to be where we are, and what happens is the universe is always going to be so supportive of that. So I guess, Stephanie, in your experience of just going through a lot of challenges, but also a lot of successes now in your freelance career, what advice would you have for like BIPOC people out there who are wanting to launch a podcast, wanting to start teaching themselves how to produce or edit, audio engineer and stuff like that?
Oh man, that's the last question, right? That's a good question. That's a hard question.
Yeah, no. We won't throw you any more curveballs.
What advice do I have? I definitely want to say, like, I think it ties into surrendering to the unknown.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you just gotta surrender to the unknown and trust that what's for you is meant for you and it's going to come into your life. And there was many times in my journey, even now, where I'm like, I'm not sure what's next. I have to go back to the drawing board, see what else I want to do, but you really have to, like, just let it be and let it flow and believe that it's coming for you. Like, if you want to work with Issa Rae, like, it's gonna happen. Like, if you want to work at a production company, like, if you want to work at Netflix, like, wherever, if you want to be a screenwriter, put it out into the universe. Like, I'm huge on just, like, new moon rituals and full moons and all of that, and, like, reading tarot cards, and that's definitely an avenue that always allows me to just surrender a little bit more in peace and tap into, like, what's next for me potentially.
Yeah, that's some great advice around just, like, moving forward, doing it, and, like, visualizing without limitations. As we are, like, wrapping up our conversation, Mary and I would love to hear, Stephanie, around, what are some upcoming projects that you are excited about, or, something that, you're personally, moving towards in your creative journey as the next, like, step in this process?
Yeah. Some next projects, I would say, I'm working on a project with Locatora Radio. So that'll be exciting once it's out into the world. I'm an associate producer for one of their projects now. So I'm also editing, but I'm, like, doing more AP things. And then I would also say looking into the future, I really do see myself doing a lot more producing work, either in film or maybe, like, digital producing at, like, a marketing company. I don't know. But yeah, I really want to tap into the film space and just kind of, like, connect more with people and their journeys in there, and, like, how they can kind of, be a filmmaker.
That's awesome, Stephanie. We'll be waiting for that first, advance notice, first scene of, like, hey, here it is.
I got you.
And then just to close out, we just asked these two just quick hit questions to all of our guests. So the first one being, in 5 words, describe your creative journey.
Exhilarating.
Love that.
I have 4 more, right?
Yes.
I say exhilarating, adventurous, scary, freeing, and hopeful.
That's amazing. And lastly, where can we find you and our audience? Where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, so my social media handle is Stephaniezy. I have to update it, but that's my middle school nickname from a friend a long time ago. And then you can also find my work on Squarespace, so sfranco510@squarespace.com, and you'll be able to see the projects I've been on and just learn a little bit more about myself. And I have a podcast with my co-host Itzel. It's called Work Wifeys, WERK WPHYZ. And we're on wherever you can find podcasts.
Yeah, now when I listen to an episode, because I heard an episode earlier, I'm just going to visualize both of you in the car with the voice notes.
After Thai food, you got me
boba
at Thai
hand.
food and boba. All right, we're ready.
You had the low riders in Oakland just riding by, and it was.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. Thank you both. This was really fun.
No, definitely, it was a treat having you, Stephanie. And I think just really appreciate your presence and time, and vulnerability, and all of the above, and sharing your creativity, your creative journey with us. All the goods and the work in progress, and I think all the future awesomeness that's coming to fruition. So we're very excited for that, and just really appreciate your presence.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for you both for having this space for creators. I think it's beautiful, and thank you for reaching out to me. Like, it means a lot to be here and share my journey.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you so much, Stephanie. Like, when I reached out to you, I had been following you since you were exploring your writing, and I think you attended a couple workshops. And then I saw your work as a producer, podcasting, and then I think you popped up one time on LinkedIn as well. And I was like, oh my gosh, Stephanie, duh. And it was just we have to reach out to Stephanie. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful that we were able to have this space together and, hear a little bit about the journey, and at least for me personally, walk away with, a couple of little golden nuggets that I can take away and take from as I move forward as well on my path and the changes that just happened in my life as well with leaving a job. But yeah, so I really appreciate you sharing that and just the way that resonated. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Creator Corner is a podcast production presented by the Ars Network. It is hosted by Dalia Zaragoza and Mary Figueroa. This podcast is edited and produced by Muhammad Abdullah Kawish.